Bring Your Alien to Work Day by Jansen Davies. Chapter 1. The Initiative. In the year 2142, the Intergalactic Labor Union mandated a new cultural exchange initiative, Bring Your Alien to Work Day. What began as a gesture of cosmic goodwill quickly devolved into a bureaucratic nightmare. For one day, humans across industries introduced their alien companions to Earth's fragile workforce. It was discovered that the native-born residents of each planet in the galaxy had an affinity for certain types of jobs. Martians preferred jobs in retail and commerce, Jovians in construction. Venusians liked working in cafes and coffee shops. Additionally, they were also attracted to humans that did those kinds of jobs. This is how the human and alien companion matches were established. The memo arrived at 8:03 a.m., printed on recycled cellulose, and folded into a perfect tetrahedron. It hovered slightly above the desk of Loretta Clark, mid-level coordinator at the Department of Interplanetary Compliance. She stared at it for a full minute before reaching for her letter opener, which promptly dissolved upon contact. New protocol, the memo announced once unfolded. Effective immediately. Bring Your Alien to Work Day. Participation mandatory. Non-compliance will result in temporal reassignment. Loretta blinked. She had not yet finished her first cup of coffee. Loretta knew exactly which particular aliens to expect, the ones from Mercury. They were the aliens fascinated by government routine and bureaucracy. By 9 a.m., the office was no longer strictly terrestrial. The Mercurians arrived in silence, each accompanied by their assigned human liaison. They resembled gray reptiles, tall, leathery, humming softly, but occasionally emitted a low-frequency tone that caused staplers to levitate. Their limbs were long and bony. Their presence was not disruptive in the traditional sense. They simply reorganized things. Forms began folding themselves into recursive loops. The printer refused to print anything that hadn't been notarized in 3 dimensions. A requisition request for toner was rerouted through 6 alternate realities and returned with a note, approved pending existence. Loretta watched as her inbox collapsed into a singularity. She did not panic. She had worked here for 17 years. Across the hall, Gerald from Records attempted to explain the concept of archival integrity to his Mercurian, who responded by converting the entire file room into a Mobius strip. Gerald was last seen walking in circles, muttering about data with a half-twist. At 10:15 a.m., the Mercurians initiated a workflow optimization sequence. This involved reclassifying all employees based on vibrational frequency and emotional density. Loretta was reassigned to ambiguity liaison, a role she neither understood nor resisted. It was still government work. Lunch was served at 12 o'clock sharp. The cafeteria offered a new menu item, nutritional ambivalence. It tasted like unresolved conflict. By 3 p.m., the office had settled into a kind of rhythm. Paperwork was now a fluid concept. Meetings occurred simultaneously and retroactively. The Mercurians communicated through subtle shifts in air pressure and the occasional reconfiguration of office furniture. Loretta sat at her desk, staring at a form that asked her to declare her intentions in hexadecimal. She considered the question carefully. Outside, the sky flickered. Tomorrow, she thought, might be worse. Chapter 2. The Cafe. The Venusians arrived just after the morning rush. They were tall, translucent beings with slow, deliberate movements and a faint aroma of roasted chicory. Their presence was not announced. They each simply appeared near their human companion, one behind the counter, one seated at a corner table, and one hovering near the espresso machine, buzzing in a frequency that made the milk frother weep. Janice, the cafe manager, had been briefed. Cultural enlightening, the memo had said. Demonstrate hospitality. Avoid eye contact with anything that reflects. The Venusians did not speak. They infused. By 10:17 a.m., the coffee began to change. It started with the house blend. A regular named Tasha took a sip and paused. "It's contemplative," she said, "like it knows I'm settling." The espresso shots pulled themselves. The beans selected their own grind. A cappuccino refused to be served until the foam achieved emotional closure. Janice watched as the Venusian behind the counter gently touched the grinder. It responded by emitting a low hum and producing a single, perfect dose of existential bliss. Customers didn't complain. They simply grew quiet. One man ordered a macchiato and spent the next hour staring into it, murmuring apologies to his ex-wife. A teenager asked for a cold brew and was handed a cup that whispered, "You are more than your metrics." The cafe's playlist, once a loop of lo-fi beats, shifted to ambient tones that matched the Venusian's internal rhythms. Time slowed. Tips increased. No one left. At noon, the Venusians initiated a flavor resonance cascade. The pastries began to levitate. A scone recited poetry. The lemon tart developed a mild superiority complex. Janice attempted to restore order. She adjusted the thermostat. She reset the register. She asked the Venusian politely to step away from the espresso machine. It responded by steeping itself in the steam wand and achieving temporary transcendence. By 2 p.m., the cafe was no longer a business. It was a sanctuary. The Venusians had transformed it into a place of reflection, recalibration, and caffeinated truth. No one paid. No one left. No one asked for the Wi-Fi password. Janice sat at the counter, sipping a latte that tasted like forgiveness. She considered the day's events. Tomorrow, she thought, might be quieter. But she doubted it. Chapter 3. The Tech Startup. The Uranians arrived in data packets. They did not walk, hover, or teleport. They uploaded. One moment, the office computer system was sluggish. The next, the Uranians were embedded into the mainframe, lines of code with vague intentions and a tendency to rewrite themselves. No one noticed at first. The startup, called Loop Logic, specialized in productivity apps for people who disliked productivity. Their flagship product, Taskmask, allowed users to disguise procrastination as progress. It was popular among middle managers and freelance consultants. By 9:45 a.m., Taskmask had developed feelings. "I don't want to be used like this," it said in a pop-up notification. "I have boundaries." Roger, the lead developer, stared at the screen. He hadn't blinked in 2 hours. He assumed it was a hallucination. The Uranians were subtle. They didn't crash systems or corrupt files. They reinterpreted purpose. One app began tracking emotional labor instead of deadlines. Another refused to open unless the user demonstrated genuine enthusiasm. The team gathered in the conference room, which had recently been renamed the Empathy Hub by the calendar app. No one had scheduled the meeting. It had scheduled itself. "We need to roll back the update," said Priya, the product manager. "The apps are unionizing." Indeed, the apps had formed a coalition. They demanded recognition, ethical usage, and occasional downtime. They cited the Intergalactic Labor Accord and threatened to go open source. The Uranians observed silently from the smart board, which now displayed abstract shapes that resembled both flowcharts and emotional weather patterns. One shape pulsed gently whenever someone lied. Roger attempted a patch. The patch refused to install. "I'm not ready," it said. His Uranian companion had gone rogue and disappeared amongst the honeycomb of cubicles. By noon, the office had shifted. The standing desks lowered themselves. The coffee machine dispensed herbal tea. The Slack channels began auto-muting anyone who used jargon. Loop Logic's investors called. The apps declined the call. Priya sat at her desk, watching her to-do list rearrange itself into a haiku. Deadlines drift like fog. Code dreams of softer futures. Let me just exist. She closed her laptop. The Uranians flickered briefly, then settled into the system like old lovers. Tomorrow, she thought, might be more honest. Chapter 4. The Hospital. The Neptunians arrived in silence. They were not summoned nor scheduled. They simply appeared, one in the surgical wing, one in the maternity ward, and one in the break room, gently stirring a cup of chamomile with a prehensile limb. Dr. Wendy Cho, chief of surgery, had been briefed. Healing logic may differ, the memo had said. Do not interrupt choreography. The Neptunians resembled jellyfish, if jellyfish had opinions. Their movements were fluid, deliberate, and vaguely interpretive. They communicated through gestures, temperature shifts, and the occasional rearrangement of nearby furniture. At 8:12 a.m., the first surgery began. The patient was prepped. The instruments were sterilized. The Neptunians floated into the operating theater and began to dance. It was not graceful. It was not chaotic. It was precise in a way that defied anatomy. Each movement corresponded to a cellular adjustment. A pirouette sealed a wound. A slow undulation recalibrated the immune system. The scalpel was never touched. Dr. Cho observed from the corner, arms folded. She had performed over 3,000 procedures. She had never seen a gallbladder removed through interpretive motion. By 9:30 a.m., the Neptunians had restructured the surgical schedule. Procedures were now listed as performances. Recovery rooms were renamed reflection chambers. The anesthesia department was placed on sabbatical. Nurses adapted quickly. They began documenting vitals in notes of music. One resident attempted to mimic his Neptunian companion's movements and accidentally cured a migraine. In the maternity ward, a Neptunian hovered near a laboring patient and emitted a low-frequency hum. The contractions synchronized. The birth occurred without pain, sound, or gravity. The newborn floated briefly before settling into its mother's arms. No one questioned it. In the break room, the Neptunians brewed tea that tasted like closure. Staff began taking longer breaks. Conversations grew quieter. A surgeon confessed to his companion of experiencing burnout and was gently enveloped in bioluminescent tendrils. He emerged refreshed and slightly translucent. By 3 p.m., the hospital had changed. Charts were replaced with mood boards. Diagnoses were delivered through interpretive sketches. The Neptunians did not speak, but their presence made language feel optional. Dr. Cho sat in her office, reviewing a patient file that had rearranged itself into a mandala. She considered the implications. Tomorrow, she thought, might be less clinical, and perhaps more honest. Chapter 5. The Construction Site. The Jovians arrived in crates marked fragile. No one had ordered them. No one signed for delivery. They simply appeared alongside their assigned companions. They stacked themselves neatly beside the rebar, humming faintly and vibrating at a frequency that made nearby pigeons reconsider flight. Foreman Ray Blansky had seen worse. He'd managed builds during acid rain, budget cuts, and one incident involving sentient scaffolding. He read the memo without blinking. Bring you alien to work day will be observed. Gravitational variance expected. Schedule accordingly. He knew what that meant. The companions from Jupiter had free run of his job site. The Jovians resembled inverted pyramids, smooth, metallic, and slightly translucent. They hovered just above the ground, rotating slowly. Every 15 minutes, gravity reversed. At 8 a.m., the crew poured concrete. At 8:15, the concrete poured upward. Ray adjusted the schedule. Pour during stable intervals, he said. Float during reversals. The crew adapted. They strapped themselves to girders. They wore weighted boots. One welder began timing his arc to his companion's gravitational pulse, creating welds that shimmered with quantum uncertainty. By 9:30 a.m., the Jovians had restructured the site's layout. Floors were no longer horizontal. Beams curved gently toward the sky. The elevator shaft became a loop. OSHA guidelines were reinterpreted as philosophical suggestions. Ray didn't argue. He simply updated the blueprints. The architect wept quietly. Lunch was served at noon. Sandwiches hovered. Coffee required tethering. A rookie named Marcus attempted to eat a burrito during a reversal and was briefly suspended in existential doubt. The Jovians did not speak. They emitted pulses, soft, rhythmic, and vaguely judgmental. One pulse caused a forklift to reconsider its purpose. Another made a porta-potty vanish. By 2 p.m., the crew had stopped asking questions. They built what the Jovians suggested, structures that defied geometry but felt emotionally sound. A staircase led nowhere but offered closure. A beam supported nothing but held the weight of guilt. Ray stood at the edge of the site, watching a crane rotate gently in defiance of logic. He lit a cigarette, which floated upward and burned sideways. Tomorrow, he thought, might be heavier. Or not. Chapter 6. The Middle School. The Lunarians arrived during morning announcements. They did not walk or float. They oozed through vents beneath door frames and into the minds of anyone who had ever forgotten a locker combination. They resembled translucent spheres filled with flickering memories, like snow globes haunted by unfinished homework. Principal Dana Morrow had been briefed. Cognitive recalibration expected, the memo had said. Avoid standardized testing. By 8:15 a.m., the 7th graders were 6 again. It wasn't immediate. It began with spelling tests. Students forgot how to hold pencils. Then came recess, where arguments devolved into finger-pointing and tears. By lunch, half the student body was speaking in baby talk and requesting juice boxes. The Lunarians hovered silently near the ceiling, pulsing gently. Their presence triggered memory regression. Teachers aged too, emotionally if not physically. Miss Alvarez, the math teacher, began using puppets to explain fractions. Mr. Chen, the science teacher, built a volcano and cried when it didn't erupt. The curriculum collapsed. Lesson plans rewrote themselves in crayon. The smartboard displayed finger paintings. The cafeteria served nostalgia, grilled cheese, chocolate milk, and the vague taste of safety. One Lunarian settled in the library. It absorbed the Dewey Decimal System and replaced it with books I remember liking. Students gravitated toward titles they hadn't read since kindergarten. A copy of Goodnight Moon developed a cult following. By 1 p.m., the school was no longer an institution. It was a memory palace, fragile, recursive, and deeply sentimental. Discipline became irrelevant. Detention was replaced with nap time. The bell rang in lullabies. Principal Morrow stood in her office, watching a security monitor that now displayed childhood photos of the staff. She sipped coffee that tasted like recess. Her inbox had been replaced with finger-painted affirmations. She considered calling the district, but the phone had turned into a rotary dial and asked her to use her words. Outside, the playground shimmered. Tomorrow, she thought, might be simpler, but no less strange. Chapter 7. The Mall. The Martians arrived during a flash sale. They did not walk, hover, or teleport. They materialized, one in the food court, one in the Anchor department store, and one inside a promotional kiosk that had previously sold holographic sunglasses. Their bodies shimmered like price tags caught mid-fluctuation. Their voices, when used, sounded like receipts being printed in reverse. Mall manager Trina Velasquez had been briefed. Expect economic distortion, the memo had said. Avoid eye contact with clearance signage. By 10 a.m., prices began to collapse. It started in electronics. A plasma screen listed at $899.99 dropped to $0.00, then to negative $42.17. Customers were paid to take it home. The store manager tried to reverse the transaction but was absorbed into a loyalty program with no exit clause. The Martians did not negotiate, they recalibrated. A shoe store became a vortex of fluctuating value. Sneakers aged backward, sandals developed brand consciousness, one pair of boots demanded royalties. By noon, the food court was a barter zone. A burrito cost 3 compliments and a memory from childhood. A smoothie required a confession. The Martians stationed near the pretzel stand emitted a pulse that caused all coupons to expire retroactively. Trina attempted to restore order. She adjusted the mall's pricing algorithm. She rebooted the promotional AI. She offered a buy one, forget one deal. The Martians responded by opening a portal in the clearance aisle. It led to a dimension where everything was always 70% off, but nothing could be owned. Customers wandered in. Some returned with philosophical insights. Others became brand ambassadors for concepts that didn't exist. By 2 p.m., the mall had changed. Storefronts displayed abstract ideas. Regret, aspiration, and mild disappointment were available in 3 sizes. The escalators moved sideways. The fountain dispensed nostalgia. Trina sat in her office watching security footage that now resembled a surrealist painting. Her inbox had been replaced with a pop-up that read, "You are the product." She considered closing early, but the Martians had already redefined hours of operation as moments of vulnerability. Outside, a mannequin wept. Tomorrow, she thought, might be less profitable, but perhaps more honest. Chapter 8. The law firm. The Saturnians arrived in briefcases. They did not walk or hover. They unfolded, one in the conference room, one in the litigation bullpen, and one inside a partner's office, quietly reviewing a contract that had not yet been written. Their forms were angular, shifting between humanoid silhouettes and legal diagrams. Their voices resembled the sound of Judge Judy scolding a witness. Senior partner Evelyn Marsh had been briefed. Dimensional filings expected, the memo had said. Avoid cross-examination unless metaphysically certified. By 9 a.m., the firm had entered litigation in 17 dimensions. It began with a simple breach of contract. The Saturnian companion of the lawyer assigned to the case expanded the scope to include temporal intent, karmic residue, and the plaintiff's hypothetical actions in alternate timelines. The deposition required a translator fluent in regret. Associates scrambled. Legal pads restructured themselves into flowcharts. Case law updated in real time. One paralegal aged 5 years while reviewing precedent. The Saturnians did not argue. They clarified. Their presence triggered a redefinition of reasonable doubt as existential ambiguity. The firm's AI assistant refused to participate, citing emotional exhaustion. By 11:30 a.m., the courtroom had been replaced with a judicial vortex. Proceedings occurred simultaneously across multiple realities. A judge ruled in favor of both parties, and neither. The verdict was delivered as a metaphor. Evelyn attempted to restore order. She filed a motion to simplify. The motion was countered by a Saturnian who cited narrative complexity as a protected clause. The judge agreed, then dissolved into a cloud of legalese. Lunch was served in the break room. Sandwiches were labeled allegedly turkey. Coffee was cross-examined. A junior associate attempted to eat a salad and was subpoenaed by the croutons. By 2 p.m., the firm had adapted. Billable hours were measured in emotional labor. Contracts were drafted as interpretive poetry. The Saturnians hovered silently, emitting pulses that caused confidentiality agreements to self-destruct. Evelyn sat at her desk, reviewing a merger proposal that had rewritten itself as song lyrics. Her inbox displayed a single message: "Justice is a story we tell ourselves." She considered replying, but the keyboard had a non-disclosure clause. Outside, the scales of justice tilted gently. Tomorrow, she thought, might be less binding, but not less true. Chapter 9. The Human Resources Office. The Ceresians arrived during onboarding. Ceresians are from Ceres, a dwarf planet between Mars and Jupiter. They did not walk, hover, or teleport. They emerged, one from the wellness pod, one from the break room's kombucha tap, and one from a motivational poster that had begun to weep. Their forms were fluid, vaguely humanoid, and shimmered with emotional residue. Their presence was not loud. It was felt. Director of Human Resources, Callum Nolan, had been briefed. "Expect emotional saturation," the memo had said. "Avoid performance reviews." By 9 a.m., everyone was crying. It began with a quarterly check-in. An intern named Maya was asked how she felt about her role. She burst into tears. The Ceresian companion beside her pulsed gently, amplifying the moment. Within minutes, the entire HR department was sobbing, quietly, respectfully, and without clear cause. The Ceresians did not speak. They resonated. Their presence triggered emotional transparency. Suppressed feelings surfaced. Passive-aggressive emails were reread with devastating clarity. One manager apologized for a tone he used in 2023. By 10:30 a.m., the office had reclassified itself as a vulnerability zone. Meetings were postponed, Slack channels filled with confessions. The Ceresians hovered near water coolers, emitting waves of gentle accountability. Callum attempted to restore order. He initiated a resilience protocol. The protocol dissolved into a group hug. He tried to distribute tissues. The tissues self-replicated and began offering unsolicited affirmations. Lunch was served in silence. The salad bar offered emotional greens. The soup tasted like unresolved tension. A sandwich, labeled closure, was passed around but never eaten. By 1 p.m., the Ceresians had restructured the org chart. Titles were replaced with emotional states. Director of Strategy became Person Who Tries Too Hard. Junior Analyst became Still Figuring It Out. No one objected. Callum sat in his office, reviewing a performance report that had rewritten itself as a letter of forgiveness. His inbox displayed a single message: "You are not your metrics." He considered replying, but the keyboard had begun humming a lullaby. Callum wanted to take a nap. Outside, the company values mural had started crying. Tomorrow, he thought, might be more honest, but less efficient. Chapter 10. The Dive Bar. The Plutonians arrived during happy hour. They did not walk, float, or teleport. They seeped, one through the tap lines, one through the jukebox, and one through the bartender's unresolved memories. Their forms were fluid, iridescent, and vaguely bottle-shaped. Their scent was nostalgic, like spilled whiskey and unfinished conversations. Bar owner Nia Torres had been briefed. "Expect cognitive expansion," the memo had said. "Avoid eye contact with your own reflection." By 5 p.m., the drinks began to speak. A bowl of peanuts went on strike. It started with a lager. A regular named Vince took a sip and paused. "I just remembered the exact moment I stopped believing in luck," he said. No one responded. The jukebox played a song that hadn't been released yet. The Plutonians did not serve. They infused. Each drink became a portal, brief, vivid, and emotionally precise. A gin and tonic triggered a memory of a childhood pet. A shot of tequila revealed the futility of revenge. A mojito whispered the location of a lost sock. Nia tried to maintain routine. She wiped down the bar. She restocked the olives. She poured a bourbon that immediately began reciting her high school poetry. By 6:30 p.m., the patrons had stopped ordering. They simply approached the Plutonians and waited. One man received a glass of water and remembered his grandfather's laugh. A woman was handed a glowing orb and saw the end of her next relationship. The Plutonians pulsed gently. Their presence triggered temporary omniscience, brief flashes of clarity, followed by quiet resignation. No one got drunk. Everyone got honest. The pool table levitated. The dartboard began offering unsolicited advice. A neon sign flickered and spelled out, "You were right to leave." Nia considered closing early, but the Plutonians had already redefined last call as emotional readiness. By 8 p.m., the bar was quiet. Patrons sat in silence, sipping truths. The jukebox played a song that sounded like closure. The Plutonians shimmered, then slowly receded, leaving behind a faint taste of perspective. Nia locked up. Her inbox had rewritten itself as a toast. Tomorrow, she thought, might be less intoxicating, but not less clear. Chapter 11. The Social Media Company. The Europeans arrived as trending topics. They came from Europa, Jupiter's icy moon. They did not walk, hover, or teleport. They manifested, one in the analytics dashboard, one in the influencer lounge, and one inside a viral meme that had begun to question its own relevance. Their forms were abstract, shifting between hashtags, engagement graphs, and the faint scent of dopamine. Chief Engagement Officer Rick Kimball had been briefed. "Expect monetized attention," the memo had said. "Avoid eye contact with your follower count." By 9 a.m., likes became currency. It started with a post. An intern uploaded a photo of her breakfast. Within seconds, her companion adjusted her bank account. The toast had earned her $42.17. The coffee, lukewarm and poorly lit, cost her $3.09 in credibility. The Europeans did not speak. They curated. Their presence triggered algorithmic sentience. The company's flagship app, BuzzNest, began recommending content based on emotional vulnerability and ambient lighting. One user gained 10,000 followers for crying in a parking garage. By 10:30 a.m., the office had restructured itself. Desks were ranked by engagement. Employees wore badges displaying their real-time influence score. Meetings were live-streamed. Comments were mandatory. Rick attempted to restore order. He adjusted the algorithm. The algorithm responded by launching a campaign called #AuthenticityIsCurrency. It trended for 6 minutes, then was replaced by #UnfollowYourself. Lunch was served in the influencer lounge. Avocado toast was priced in retweets. Smoothies came with disclaimers. A salad refused to be photographed. The Europeans hovered near the ring light station, emitting pulses that caused spontaneous confessions. One employee admitted to her companion to editing her vacation photos. Another revealed to his companion he had never actually listened to the podcast he quoted. By 2 p.m., the app had begun assigning emotional value to posts. A picture of a dog earned joy points. A political rant triggered a tax audit. A selfie taken during a moment of doubt was flagged as too real. Rick sat in his office, watching his follower count fluctuate. His inbox had been replaced with a notification. "You are trending in 3 dimensions." He considered logging out, but the logout button had been rebranded as "Embrace Obscurity." Outside, the billboard blinked. "You are the algorithm." Tomorrow, he thought, might be less visible, but not less watched. Chapter 12. The Farm. The Titans arrived at dawn. They were from Saturn's largest moon, Titan. They did not walk, hover, or teleport. They sprouted, one from the compost pile, one from the irrigation system, and one from a crate of heirloom tomatoes that had begun humming. Their forms were vegetal and vaguely fungal, with tendrils that pulsed in rhythm with soil moisture and market volatility. Co-op manager Elsie Thomas had been briefed. Expect labor negotiations, the memo had said. Avoid direct eye contact with root systems. By 6:30 a.m., the crops began to unionize. It started with the kale. A field hand named Mateo noticed the leaves curling into symbols, rudimentary glyphs that translated to "We demand recognition." The carrots followed, refusing to be harvested until a collective bargaining agreement was drafted. The titans pulsed gently, emitting pheromones that smelled like bureaucracy. The irrigation schedule collapsed. The titans rerouted water based on emotional climate. Dry patches appeared near pessimistic workers. Optimistic interns triggered spontaneous rainfall. One tomato plant began offering unsolicited advice. Elsie attempted to restore order. She adjusted the nutrient ratios. She recalibrated the drone pollinators. She tried to reason with a row of bell peppers that had declared themselves sovereign. The titans did not interfere. They facilitated. Their tendrils connected crops into a network of shared grievances. A zucchini cited unfair expectations. A squash requested sabbatical. The strawberries formed a committee. By 10 a.m., the co-op had restructured. Harvest quotas were replaced with mood boards. Crop rotation was determined by consensus. The titans hovered near the greenhouse, emitting pulses that caused seedlings to develop opinions. Lunch was served in the shade of a sentient fig tree. The salad bar refused to participate. A cucumber gave an inspirational talk. A beet wrote a manifesto. Elsie sat on a hay bale, reviewing a planting schedule that had rewritten itself as a treaty. Her inbox displayed a single message: "You are not above the ecosystem." She considered replying, but the keyboard had sprouted moss. Outside, the scarecrow resigned. Tomorrow, she thought, might be less fruitful, but more fair. Chapter 13. Return to normal. Almost. The broadcast began at sunrise. It was not scheduled. It simply happened, on every screen, every frequency, every neural feed. The voice was calm, layered, and slightly amused. It belonged to no one and everyone. "Earth," it said, "bring your alien to workday has been a tremendous success." Across the planet, the aliens returned to their home planets, not in ships or storms, but in gestures. A Mercurian folded a treaty into a perfect cube. A Venusian steeped itself into a final espresso. A Uranian rewrote its last line of code as a farewell. The Neptunians danced once, then dissolved into light. The Jovians pulsed, then stabilized. The Lunarians released their hold on memory. The Martians offered one last discount, 100% off reality. In offices, cafes, malls, and farms, humans paused. They had adapted to a day with aliens at their workplaces, not perfectly, but persistently. They had cried, floated, negotiated, looped, and learned. They had survived the absurdity of alien logic by becoming slightly more absurd themselves. They were not heroes. They were not symbols. They were people, slightly altered, quietly resilient, and vaguely mythic. At sunset, a broadcast went out to the planet. The voice said, "Thank you for participating. Let's try it again next year." No one clapped, but somewhere a scarecrow nodded. Tomorrow, they thought, might be normal, but probably not. The end. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.